So we're going to talk about consciousness, how your mind was built and what it was designed to do. And I love this phrase. It just came into my head about 6 months ago. I'd love to write a book about it. Who is the author of your desire? Who is the author of your desire? Or, do you think your thoughts or do they think you? I quote William Gertzman in my first book. He says, money makes us creatures of time. Money makes us creatures of time. I find that very interesting. Like all of us, if you parked at a meter, right? Or at the end of the month, like mortgage, rent, things like that. Credit cards. Money makes us creatures of time. It alters the way we think. So I want to know why you want the shit that you want and why you think the shit that you think. So sociologically, we are weird, we are Western, we are educated, we are industrialized, rich, and democratic. And it's interesting to me because we're 98% of behavioral science experiments are from our populations, but then we're only 12% of the world. We inflict all of our DSM diagnoses, like, oh my God, that kid from Papua New Guinea, he can't find a papaya, like he has ADHD. No, he does not have ADHD. We have ADHD because we're multitasking and so it's very interesting, the prescriptions in our society that we consider to be normal, the 900 pages of the DSM, and then, how they relate to the rest of the world and what they will be in 40 or 50 years. Obviously everybody in here knows that in 1973 in the DSM-2, homosexuality was a disease, right? You know that. In 1972, in the United States of America, this country where you live, homosexuality was considered a mental disorder, a disease. So, again, I'm interested in language, and language reifies things. So, we say things like, I am sad, or I am a doctor. Like, that's absurd. I am a human being. I'm currently experiencing the emotion of sadness. It's a huge distinction, right? Between saying, I am sad, or I am a human being, I'm experiencing this emotion. So language reifies these things. All right. So in Malibu, there are 50 treatment centers. And if you go to any of those meetings, you will find a lot of people have this thing called negative self-talk. So was any baby ever born with negative self-talk? I'm not good enough. No. The baby wasn't born with language. So how do we have this epidemic in our culture? 100 million prescriptions for antidepressants were written last year, and 22 million of your fellow Americans woke up this morning and took antidepressants. How's that possible, right? Maybe we'll want to take a look at our school system or capitalism, or like the things we consider to be normal, the 5-day work week, which obviously was eviscerated during COVID. And we're finding out that all these new things, like people actually, don't want to sit in a cubicle for 70 hours a week. So I'm just going to be provocative and say, I think that most of our interactions for the first 18 years of our lives are some form of behavior modification. Your parents smile when you use a fork, and they frown when you throw the spaghetti on the floor, right? And the language around that is extremely negative. Like, we're trying to make these, I always tell this joke. My buddy David, we lived in New York City 20 years ago. He had a 2-year-old, and he needed letters of recommendation to get the 2-year-old into some preschool. And he said, yeah, but they have a very high correlation of getting those kids into Harvard. And I was like, your child wants to play with things. They're not concerned with letters of recommendation and getting into Harvard in 16 years. But we're trying to make productive members of society, and we do that through constraining them, right? We do them by telling them what not to do. Again, negative self-talk. Think about this. Don't do this. Don't do that. So Donald Winnicott from the United Kingdom talks about, I'm paraphrasing, we develop a false self, a facade, a persona, in order to survive our childhoods. And there's this phrase I've just heard recently, breadcrumb. Again, we create this false self in order to get the breadcrumbs of our emotional and psychological needs met when we're kids. And whatever persona you created to survive your childhood, whether it's you were the jock or the cool or the rebel or whatever it is fantastic. And I know that because you're here. On the other hand, there might be unwitting ramifications of the persona that you created when you were 7, 11, or 14 that are hindering you now from getting the authentic love that you really crave. So again, in our society, on the outside, we have this false self persona facade. And then on the inside, we have this negative self-talk. What does that add up to? The imposter syndrome, right? I'm not good enough, and I'm going to sabotage all my relationships before like they can find out that I'm really, unworthy, things like that. So